So we're going to get started in a moment. Sorry to interrupt. So just to let folks know, we have some people still coming in. One of our speakers is en route, but we're going to get started. Our understanding is a number of people joining us over YouTube, so thank you for joining. Just wanted to say a couple words of welcome. I'm Allison Lair Samuels. I'm the director of Baruch Center for Teaching and Learning, and I must say I'm so happy to be here today. This project, what we're about to hear, is one of the reasons why I love what I do, where we can give voices to creativity, scholarship, research, give tools for our students to see something in themselves, see possibilities for their future, being part of the conversations of what's coming next. And I'm very excited today to hear what you envision in terms of the future and the possibilities and drawing upon our past. And I just also want to thank the CUNY OER grant that's been funding this project over the years in its many iterations, and as well as the Transforming the Humanities in the Classroom grant as well for today. So I'm going to turn it over to Hamad Zindi, who has been a key developer in the project today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. Remove my mask. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I gather there's some people still stuck at security, so hopefully more people will trickle in. Thank you, everyone, joining on YouTube. I just want to set the context for the project, why we're having this conversation right now, what's the significance of having this conversation, and just also want to welcome our panelists. If I can get the technology to work. Dr. Karanja Keita Carroll. I'll do more formal biographical introductions in a bit. But Dr. Karanja Carroll is here with us, Dasharah Green, and Dr. Kashema Hutchinson will join us shortly as well. And the conversation is moderated by the Center for Teaching and Learning's Christopher Campbell. Dr. Hutchinson, welcome. So we're so glad you're here. You'll see the people in the room. You have note cards on your chairs or the chairs next to you. We have some extra pens lying around. Please participate. This is a conversation. Very informal. The panelists are going to be conversing with each other. Write down questions that you have as they come up, thoughts that you have as they come up, and we'll gather them for you and bring them to the moderator. Same for the people on YouTube. Please use the live chat to put down your questions and your thoughts, and the moderator they'll trickle into the moderator as well. So thank you for participating. Just a couple words about the Center for Teaching and Learning here at Baruch, the people who are involved in the CUNY 1969 project. Myself, the project was initiated by Lindsay Albrecht and myself a few years ago. It's been through some iterations. And Allison has been very gracious supporting this project. Seth Graves now is a major developer of the project. He is ill today and he couldn't be with us, but he's watching on YouTube. Hey, Seth. And we are joined also by Christopher Campbell, who's moderating, as well as Pamela Thielman, who's been working behind the scenes as well and developing this project. So the year is 1969. The location is New York City. Actually, it's just around here. There used to be a City College campus, the Free University building, right, 17 Lex. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the country, there's a lot going on in the city, and there's a lot going on at CUNY. And so what we want to do here is have a talk about what happened not just that year, but the years before that, the years after that, in the 70s and the 80s, even what's going on right now with higher education, with, politically what's allowed, what's not allowed, and how that all bears upon each other. So the CUNY 1969 project, when we first thought about it, we wanted to answer a few questions, but one that really kind of floated to the top was, how do you take part in shaping the university, the public university, our public university? How do we take part, the students, especially faculty, everyone who is part of it? How do we shape it to make something that we want it to be, right? And in 1969, that is what they did. It started with something like the 5 demands, among a lot of other things. But this was one of the central documents from that time, from that struggle. And maybe we'll talk about that. What did the 5 demands mean? What could they look like right now? How do we teach about them? There were a lot of protest movements. SEEK was struggling as well as an institution on campus, bringing in a lot of students who were not represented at that time on campus. We have, in the project, we feature students, we feature student activists, faculty activists, really anyone who was involved. And I know some of the people watching on YouTube right now were actually also involved during that time in this struggle. So welcome, and please share your thoughts with us. We have a context in which, in this project, what we want to do is take you as, if you're a student learning about this, or if you're a teacher teaching about this, taking you as a first kind of person character through a narrative that really gets you comfortable with a lot of the materials from the archives. So the CUNY Digital History Archive, Roxanne Shirazi, you're here, and thank you for working on that. From other archives around CUNY, we assembled all of this in this one project, and we have you as a person going through it, really looking at these documents, pamphlets, all kinds of things that were on there, and engaging with that. So let's get this conversation started. Let me do quick introductions, more biographical introductions. Dr. Karanja Keita Carroll is currently a member of the Department of Black and Latinx Studies at Baruch College. His teaching and research interests revolve around African-centered theory and methodology, with an emphasis on social and psychological theory. As an advocate of prison education, Dr. Carroll has also held workshops and/or lectured in SCI Chester, Shawangunk, Sullivan, and Brookwood Secure Center. His publications have appeared in the Journal of Pan-African Studies, Western Journal of Black Studies, Journal of the International Society of Teacher Education, Critical Sociology and Race, Gender and Class. He also has articles and chapters in numerous edited volumes. Dr. Carroll is an African-centered social theorist who is thoroughly committed to the African-centered imperative, one that is grounded in the creation and utilization of culturally specific frameworks in order to understand and create solutions for humanity. Dr. Carroll is also an organizer with the Malcolm X grassroots movement, Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition, and Black Alliance for Peace. Dr. Carroll is fundamentally committed to academic excellence and social responsibility as originally articulated by the National Council for Black Studies. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Carroll. Dr. Kashema Hutchinson is a scholar, synthesizer, and educator. Her work is an alchemy of sources that values and highlights the knowledge production of Black youths, usually through a hip-hop lens. She also creates hip-hop infographics to facilitate discussions in various spaces, including New York City correctional facilities. Kashema is an assistant editor of blacklanguagessyllabus.com. She has taught undergraduate courses at CUNY. Kashema was also co-director of the CUNY Peer Leaders, a community-based program that supports CUNY undergraduate student scholarship and creative work in the humanities and assists students in developing leadership skills to implement within their colleges and communities. Her research interests include mattering and marginalization and hip-hop as a theoretical framework. Thank you, Dr. Hutchinson, for joining us. Dasharah Green is a third-year English PhD student at the CUNY Graduate Center. Her current research explores Black feminist archives and the art of Black women storytelling. She uses language as a tool to reimagine and uncover/track histories and genealogies of Black life through writing and storytelling. Dasharah has published creative writing projects and academic essays in various journals. She currently teaches a course on the evolution and expansion of racism through the study of archives in the Black and Latino Studies Department at Baruch. And she has taught English 101 at John Jay and Lehman College. Thank you, Dasharah, for joining us. Christopher Campbell is a doctoral candidate at the CUNY Graduate Center who specializes in AIDS literature, queer theory, and memoir. At Baruch, Chris served as a 2020-2021 Writing Across the Curriculum Fellow and has taught first-year writing and great works of literature since 2016. He has taught similar courses at Bard High School, Early College, NYU, and KGC 21 in South Korea. He holds a BA English Literature and MSc Architecture, both from the University of Cincinnati, as well as an MPhil Comparative Literature from the CUNY Graduate Center, where he serves as its Graduate Council's co-chair for communications. And thank you, Chris, for moderating this discussion. So I'll let Chris and the panelists have this amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamad and Allison, for the introductions. And thank you for being here today. So I have a few questions for you, and I wanted to start with maybe a more general one, and that's what brought you to the CUNY 1969 project. And feel free to answer in whatever order you'd like. Yeah.
I can start.
Okay.
So first, I want to give a shout out and recognize Sharifa Hampton. She's a colleague of mine at Baruch and also a fellow CUNY Graduate Center PhD student. And she originally signed up to be a part of the teach-in last summer, and she kind of gave me the nudge to do so as well. And then upon doing my own research, I was really excited to just kind of work and learn amongst other researchers and scholars who do similar work or not so similar work, and also learning more about how to kind of house this type of digital kind of archive project, because that also helps me with my own research and the projects that I'm working on as well.
All right. I've always been interested in the history of specifically Black Studies programs, but also now Black and Latino Studies programs. And wherever I've taught at, I've tried to navigate that history, and the CUNY 1969 project had it all there. So it only made sense that I participate in it and try to figure out those connections between what we're trying to do today within Black and Latino Studies and the historical components that allowed us to get here.
Thank you. Yeah, similar to Karanja, Dr. Karanja, my apologies. I was interested in the 1968, 1969, the movements that were there, the Black and Latino movements that were there, especially the youth movements that were catalysts to change and diversity. And so when I saw the project, I was like, this aligns with my projects that I teach, with the curriculum that I taught at in the Black and Latino Studies program, which was the evolution and expression of racism. And so it was just like a gift, actually. And I was just like so excited to be a part of the program and actually learn more, even more, to discuss and critique and have such a wealth of information provided by the CUNY 1969 project to put in my curriculum. Thank you.
So the next set of questions, I have a few questions for you specifically, but if you feel like you want to jump in and add an answer or any observations on what someone else has answered, feel free to do so. All right. So my first question is for Dr. Carroll, and I'd like to know, I know that you research and study similar student movements across both the United States as well as across history. What would you say is unique about the CUNY context?
So, yeah, like I said, I've always been interested in the development of Black Studies department. So I'm very familiar with what took place at San Francisco State College in 1968 and how we had an alliance between students and faculty and community organizers to demand for Black Studies. I'm also familiar with what happened at some SUNY schools where you actually had administrations that were supportive of the development of Black Studies. I'm also familiar with what happened at Cornell when, they were the most radical, in my opinion. And when we moved to what took place with the CUNY 1969 project, you have to deal with the unique geographical and ethnic realities of New York City, where it is Black folks and Puerto Rican folks, both colonized folks, who were saying, hold up, we want an educational experience that speaks to our reality and that speaks to the changing world that we are trying to shape. And they were saying, hold up, look at CUNY. Okay, 90% white faculty, 90% white students here. That doesn't reflect who we are. We need to make that demand. So I think what makes what happened within CUNY unique is the alliance between Black and brown folks, okay? And you find that arguably when you have departments at Hunter College that develop that are Black and Latino studies, when you have a department like here at Baruch where it's Black and Latino studies, that's the uniqueness. And even when you begin to look at potential ethnic studies programs that might develop on the West Coast, I'd argue that the political consciousness of the students and the organizers in the East is what sets it apart.
And just to follow up with that, could you elaborate a bit on, you mentioned San Francisco State and Cornell. Could you elaborate?
Oh, no, San Francisco State. That's the start of Black Studies. Nathan Hare, Amiri Baraka, Sonia Sanchez, Askia Toure, members of the Black Arts Movement. Nathan Hare previously is coming from Howard University where he was dismissed, you could say. And he comes and he connects with, student organizers. The Jimmy Garrett was a student organizer at San Francisco State College who literally searched out Nathan Hare at American Sociological Association Conference and was like, listen, we want you to come to San Francisco State because we have a project that we want you to help and assist. And it was Nathan Hare who comes together and says that, when we develop Black Studies, it's fundamentally about connecting the campus to the community. We want to make sure that we are providing students with what they need. Now, at Cornell, you had similar type of demands, but the political conscience of the folks at Cornell was important because while Hare in the West is saying we want a Department of Black Studies that has power, they were arguing that they want a center of Black Studies. And arguing for a center of Black Studies means that you have a different political relationship with the university structure. And all these things are important when you think about the longevity of Black Studies, of Black and Latino studies. How do we exist within these institutions that are constantly changing and to a certain extent always trying to get rid of us?
So thank you for, does anybody want to follow up with anything to add to that? Well, okay. I just want, if you'd like to jump in, I won't ask every question if you want to jump in, but so my next question is for Dr. Hutchinson, and from what I've learned about your journey as an educator, that your career as an educator has been enterprising and far-reaching, and often has traversed traditional boundaries within and beyond higher education spaces. Could you tell us about these experiences? And then secondly, how has your experience interacting across these different spaces shaped what you want to impart as an educator and scholar?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So as a participant practitioner of hip hop culture, the fifth element is knowledge of self and community. And so in these different spaces that I teach, which includes correctional facilities, I have conversations with men and women about how they see themselves, why they see themselves that way, and what it reflects, right? And so as a educator in a academic institution, the role or the job is to create employees for the work field. But there's so much more to life than a 9 to 5, however you look at that. And so for me, it was more or less knowing and understanding that coming into this, right? And knowing and understanding that my students are more than a number. My students are more than just, give them a grade and pass them by. There's certain things that they don't see and understand. An example of that is one day my student was absent and I had taught the young lords. And so she was like, "Miss, what is that? I've never heard of it." And I just looked at her and paused, right? She was a Latina. She identified as a Latina, but she'd never heard of the Young Lords, and she had missed the course. So it became office hours immediately. And so we had this conversation, and we delved into what it is. And she's like, "No one's ever taught me that." And I was like, "That's why I'm teaching it. Because you need to know and understand your history, your power, and who you are in society, in whatever role you're in, and remember it and continue to have that legacy of resistance, of triumph, of, being whole and not being, quote unquote, marginalized. You are not on the margins, right? And so my experiences in Rikers, in non-traditional spaces, it really taught me not to confine myself to those boundaries, right? Of what, give them a grade, test them, right? I don't give tests because I was just like, you can memorize and copy. This is not copy and paste. I need you to think. I need you to feel. I need you to experience. And so my experience as an educator comes from my experiential knowledge in and out of different spaces.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then my third question is for Dasharah. How do you address the role of archives in framing history? And I'm thinking here particularly of archival concepts like omission and exclusion. And then secondly, how do you connect students with the history of people who were systematically excluded from archival collecting?
So in my class, specifically my BLS class for archives, students are reintroduced to archival research and Black storytelling as an attempt to bring suppressed voices of the past to the surface by means of hard research and scattered facts. And I'm actually going to quote one of my students from class yesterday. My students, they read Venus in Two Acts by Saadia Hartman. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with that or anyone watching. It's a great essay. It's also very dense, so we broke it down in class, and I had them do some group work with it. And one of my students said that the archives is a crime scene, which I thought was a great way to kind of frame it. I mean, you can write a dissertation on that on itself. I'm pretty sure some people have. And also that the archives, specifically for Black and brown individuals, it's a double-edged sword. So it's the process of enlightening in terms of like learning about new people or new experiences or things that you hadn't really engaged with before, but then it's also the reliving of the past. So how the class is broken up, it's actually structured into 3 different units. So the first unit is storytelling, where in terms of your second part of the question of how do you connect students with history of people who are systematically excluded from archival collecting is to read people who do this work. So Saadia Hartman, Claudia Rankin, if we're thinking citizens. Our second unit, which we go into the flesh as archives, kind of again does this re-theorizing of archives and how it's not just like the tangible kind of materials that are excluded or omitted or that is behind a paywall, or if you're not in a certain city or don't have certain funding, you can't go there. If you're not part of a certain university, you can't go there. So we're thinking about how the body kind of holds different stories. So we're thinking through that through Octavia Butler's Kindred. I won't do any spoiler alerts if you didn't read it. But it's a great example of the body, the flesh, putting yourself through this kind of history through time, and also the fragility of time, which I think is important, especially if we're thinking about archives for Black and brown students and people, thinking through this certain urgency. So at its core, like, it's a reframing of archives and kind of re-theorizing as archives that is something that's all around us, right? So an urgency of writing yourself or people that you know into a history that you want to see.
And Dr. Carroll and Dr. Hutchinson, to follow up with that, I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit more about the courses that you teach and maybe some of I know you mentioned some of the assignments that you assign to students. Could you tell us a little bit about those?
I'll let you go first. I'll follow up.
When I taught the amazing course, and big shout out to Dr. Eversley, who's in the building, the evolution expressions of racism, I looked at it through rhetoric, right? What is being said, because language is so powerful. Who's saying it? Why are they saying it? And when are they saying it? And so what we did was we had a timeline of sorts that was, the crux of it was in 13th, the amendment, the documentary. And so I had them listen, I had them watch, look, listen to what was being said, who was saying it, and why they were saying it. And then I would pause it every once in a while and get feedback from them, right? What are your thoughts on this? How do you feel about this, right? Because this is still impacting you today. And even if you don't think it is, it's the reason why your zip code looks the way it is. It's the reason why, you go to this school as opposed to that school. And so we have these conversations about it, and then I say, well, there's also that social media component, right? Everyone's on their phone. I don't know what they're doing. I don't ban them because I've learned that just because they're on the phone doesn't mean that they're not listening. And so I have them really look at images, and I said, you've been on your phone looking at images all day long. Now look at these images and tell me what you see, right? And then for them, it's a different exercise than the scrolling that they do or the swiping that they do. And so for them, they really are now critically thinking and looking at images and text and listening, right? Also the music that they listen to. I have something called critical karaoke. So they have to take a social justice song, break it down, understand it, and then write about it and then present it in front of the classroom. This is where they get nervous. Miss, we have to sing. No, you do not sing. If you do sing, you fail my class. However, I need you to break it down. Dr. Catapultis taught me this exercise. And so have them break it down and engage. And they were just like, I never really thought about that. And what happens is they start to introduce each other to new songs, right? And then what happens is the popular song gets played and they're just like, I didn't know the background to that part of that lyric. I didn't know this came from this. And so they started engaging. And I was like, it terrorized them in the beginning when we went through the syllabus. But after they do it, like, that was easy, that was fun, can we do it again? Can I do it for my final paper? No, you can't, but thank you for engaging and thank you for participating. And so, like, I have these different activities which allows them to really look at the evolution expression of racism differently than they thought they were coming into. They thought they were going to just read and read and read and read, and I was just like, no, life is lived in 3D. There's so many ways. It's very sensory, right, and stimuli, and so you have to be aware of those stimuli when it's coming into you and the information that's coming into you.
So, and to follow up with that, I have a question about history, objects of history, objects of culture. How would you say that you use those in the classroom to elucidate the theory that you're teaching? Yeah,
so like I do have some theory for them. I hit them really hard with Sylvia Winter's NHI, and they're like, Miss, what is this? And I'm just like, I got you. And I tell them, there's a rule for me. If an educator gives you information and you don't understand and they don't break it down for you, they have failed you. And so we sit through the classes and we have this conversation. And in the end of the text, Sylvia Winter says, it's a street intellectual who knows the truth. And if you need that information, you go to them. And so we again, with rhetoric and language, street intellectual, that idea, right? What does that look like? How does that sound? Who is a street intellectual? And I said, is it not you? Are you not someone who's in urban America who lives and experiences life? Do you not know oppression? Do you not know what the marginalization looks like? Do you know what mattering is? Have you felt it? And then so we have these conversations, and what it does, it allows them to see themselves, to value themselves, and like they start to talk more in the class, right? Now they value themselves. And also those who speak multi-languages, in my critical thinking class, we do Bordeaux, right? And that was early college at LaGuardia. These are high school students, and I'm just like, it's a language and value system that we're having right now. That's based on power. And so what you said and what this person said, even though they're different, it's the same thing. And so one is validated because it's of patriarchy, Eurocentric, but you can say the same thing. You have been saying the same thing. They just don't value it because you don't fit the mold.
And Dr. Carroll, maybe something about the courses that you teach.
Yeah, so I usually every semester I teach at least 2 sections of BLS 1003 like my colleagues, and after taking the CUNY 1969 project, I've infused that into the classroom, like into that specific class, and I have a section that deals with from BLS to critical race theory. And what I try to do is have my students understand that the demand and rise of BLS is connected to the response to critical race theory on one hand, but also the current fiasco going on in Florida with the African American Studies curriculum. Like that response, these are the historical continuities that I want my students to understand and be able to see the connection, to realize that the stuff isn't new, but we need to understand how these students and organizers dealt with this in the 1960s to inform how we should and possibly should not engage it right here and now. So that's what I do, and that's how I try to infuse what I've learned from the CUNY 1969 project into my BLS 1003 class. This semester, I'm also teaching the capstone, and in the capstone, I'm trying to move through looking at the relationship between the Young Lords and the Panthers in relation to community organizing, which is fundamentally connected to Black studies, fundamentally connected to Puerto Rican studies, fundamentally connected to the development of Black and Latino studies in this current moment. So for me, it's like I have to be able to get my students invested. And you get them invested by saying, hold up, there's a relationship to the fact that I am here at Baruch College, and there's a Black and Latino studies program here, and I may not be in this class, I may not even be here if these students and if these organizers did not risk, pushing this. And that's how I try to infuse it in my classes.
And so not only, you mentioned that you've used this in your class, but I've also learned a lot from the three of you over the course of, we met this past summer. And I think one of the phrases that sticks in my mind from this past summer is this term that Dasharah uses, critical fabulation. And critical fabulation is a term that I wasn't familiar with previously. So Dasharah, I'm wondering if you could tell us about critical fabulation, and how would you characterize the move from imagination in the classroom to public engagement, protests, movements?
Yeah. So I'll first define critical fabulation. It's a term or a framework coined by Sadia Hartman, just staying on the Sadia Hartman train for a second. And what it is, it's combining historical and archival research with critical theory and fiction to fill in the historical record. So to answer the first part of your question, I would say there's not really a move from the imagination to public engagement and movement, but it's a combination of both. So in our class, I urge students to bring themselves into the classroom. We do that. I know Kashema and Karanja were talking about some of the things or some of their pedagogy and rhetoric in terms of the classroom and some of the activities they do with students. So for example, students in my class, they're tasked to write a narrative, a personal creative narrative where they're using an artifact from their own personal history to write about, and they can fictionalize it. It's a nonfiction paper or essay or assignment that they can actually fictionalize. So for example, last semester, I had 2 students who used a photo of their grandparents from the Holocaust, and they wrote that scene. I had another student who used a song as inspiration, a Cuban song that her grandmother would sing after she moved away from Cuba, and she wrote that scene. So it's doing that. And then also, when I spoke earlier, I didn't speak about my third unit. So the third unit that students, that we do in class after storytelling and the Flashes archives is visual and digital archives. And that's actually where we go through the CUNY 1969 project also. But that one I think is a great way to kind of end off, because it also then tells students that like like there's a trajectory, but that also all of these are connected. So all of the things that you were thinking about and theorizing and developing this framework throughout the semester of the Flash of storytelling, you can now think about that in the context of visual and digital media. So as a final assignment, students are asked to create their own grassroots movement. And they can advocate for whatever they want. It can be, last semester, students advocated for the fixing the elevators in Baruch, which I don't know, I hope they kind of send it to somebody. So you can advocate for whatever it is that you want, whatever you have this urgency for, and they create different campaign strategies. So again, it's this connecting the imagination to what can you do with this work in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and also like what's on your spirit, what is it that you want to advocate for, what do you want to see change of or for. So I think that kind of answers the second part of your question as well. Does the classroom kind of prepare for certain elements of transition? And it's, again, bringing yourself into the classroom. So even throughout these discussions, especially when you're working with the evolution of racism in archives, something that's really sensitive, a sensitive topic, is prioritizing labor and also community and reciprocity throughout the entire semester. So that also helps with doing this work as well.
So I think we will have some audience questions, but I have my own final question for you before we move into audience questions. And based on your experience with the CUNY 1969 project, how do you imagine people using the CUNY 1969 project in the future? And what do you imagine the CUNY 1969 project, becoming? What is your vision for that? I know it's sort of a big question, but
Who's going first? I am. So I'll keep it simple. I think that what it really comes down to, like I ended, having the students understand their relationship to these institutions and their potential investment in making sure things don't go away. Like, one of the things that I've learned by studying the history of these departments and programs is that if we can get the students to understand the risk that it took to bring this stuff about, hopefully they will not let it go. And if you think about folks trying to create a movement, maybe the movement needs to be to push back against institutions that are trying to, make certain folks disappear or make certain experiences disappear. But I think that's for me the important thing is, like, because we have this project and because we have folks invested in it, they're then going to learn how they fit within the larger context.
I can just build off of what Karanja said. And also Karanja made a great point earlier when he was talking about what's going on in Florida, but also just this idea that history repeats itself, is continuous. And then going back to this idea of reaching back to understand the present and create new futures, which is what a lot of Black feminists and Black women writers, that's at the helm of their work. So again, thinking about what was being done in terms of protests in 1969, how that's relevant to today and their own experiences, what kind of connections do they see, whether it's Black Lives Matter movement or Me Too movement, all these other movements going on, just again thinking about how these systemic and systematic issues continue to kind of arise and having those type of conversations.
I think CUNY 1969 project is a very powerful engine that we can use to drive students to see, understand themselves. I mean, everything that Karanja and Dasharah said, first of all, right? And then, but also, for the possibilities of tomorrow, where do you fit in this? You know what I mean? And so I don't expect all my students to, think, but they have an understanding and their awareness of what's happening and why it's happening. Some people, when I was in college, I was pumping my fist. There was a time when all my books were about Mumia Abu Jamal, and I was there. And then of course capitalism, I had to pay bills. I got caught up, right? And then but my access, my awareness, it never left me. And so when history, sometimes if it's not repeating itself, it's rhyming. And so when history came back, I was just oh yeah, and then I check this, I'll go through this, and so I'm ready. And so it having it present, having it being an option, having it in the school, it shouldn't really be an option, actually, to be quite honest with you. But having it so students can access it and understand it, and at any point, some people are not ready for the information when you give it to them. Sometimes it needs, you may need a year or two, and they come back, or like 10 or 20 years. But having it there allows them to see and understand something that they weren't familiar with before. Because if you ask them what happened in any freshman, you ask them, what happened to CUNY in 1969? Right? And so if you didn't know, now you know.
Yeah, this is something we've been pondering, and thank you for that. We have a few questions from the audience. I'm not sure if this came from this crowd here or if it came from the crowd online, but the first one is, and feel free to jump in whenever, what do you want your students to understand about being at CUNY and being a CUNY student?
That is a good question, and so it goes back to what I was saying about the uniqueness of the CUNY experience, like the largest public university system, and like what happens when we have all these folks who are in this geography come together and attempt to learn together. And I think that's what is probably the beauty of the BLS 1003 class, is because I'm pulling in so many students and I'm having them try to learn from the experience of others, but also learn about the historical experiences of Black and brown folks within the larger nation, but within New York as well. So maybe it's about having them be better humans. You know what I'm saying? So that when they see the injustice and oppression, they have a point of reference of why they need to push back. I think that's what it is for me.
I think Karanja said it, but I'll also add to it. I had the luxury of graduating from CUNY and then also attending a private institution and coming back to CUNY. I really just tell my students that CUNY is a very wide known kind of system or university and organization, even outside of New York. And some students don't really recognize that or realize that because it is a commuter school. So if you think about, most of the CUNY students not really living in dorms, living at home, a lot of that type of college experiences could be kind of lost, especially also because a lot of students also have to work. We spoke about capitalism, they don't really have the luxury to just stay on campus all the time. But also CUNY just offers so many resources also for this outside of the classroom, fellowships, and then also having the opportunity to be in conversation with different students and faculty across different colleges. You can attend Baruch and then be in conversation and reach out to faculty that's in John Jay and so on and so forth. So really thinking of CUNY itself as its whole entire community.
Similar to Dasharah, all my degrees came from CUNY. As a New Yorker, I realized I'm not spending that money for the same degree. Are you mad? And so, and the love-hate relationship that I have with CUNY is the phenomenal people that I've impacted in my life. It's like the school of hard knocks, right? And the thing is that sometimes people downplay it, it's public university, so it's this. It's what you make it. It's really what you make it. I still have some 4-letter words that I could extend, but I also have a love for my experience that helped me to be the person I am today. And so I would say, when you come to CUNY, come with an open mind, but also know that there's some things that you have to navigate, and come in here just, it's New York. Don't do that. Come in and know and understand that it's also a place where you will learn some things the hard way if you're not paying attention.
Can I just add, I think just the geography of like New York City and all of the history that has taken place in New York. It's a beautiful thing to know that you can take your students right outside of campus and be like, this happened here. Like that makes teaching at CUNY unique. And I've taught in the SUNY system, and when you think about the fact that you might have some dormitories within the SUNY system versus commuters within the CUNY system, I think it's beautiful that we can literally get on the train and be in Harlem, and I can show them, where the Young Lords People's Church is at. I can show them all of these spaces that are important to understand the course content.
The second question I have here, it's a bit of a self-reflective question, similar to the first question. What do you want to understand about your own place or experience at CUNY? Or what did you in the past want to understand? So what do you want to understand about your own place or experience at CUNY?
I'm not answering first.
I mean, that's a good question. I'll probably have to sit on that and come up with a better answer when I'm like at home or on the train randomly thinking about it again. But I would say, like, with CUNY, building off of also what Kashema said, I do feel like I found a home, as like cliche and like cringy as that sounds. Being in CUNY, leaving CUNY, and then coming back to CUNY. I always knew that I wanted to get my PhD at the CUNY Graduate Center. And just throughout my experience with CUNY, like, I've met some really great people. I've met some like amazing friends and colleagues of different disciplines, of different backgrounds, some from New York, some not from New York. And then also just being a New Yorker myself and just holding that with me wherever I go. I just also feel a certain level of pride of also getting all these different degrees and educations from CUNY. And also, I graduated undergrad at John Jay, and John Jay really did change my life. Like, I'm going to be very honest. Like, the faculty there, the mentorship that I developed there was like really amazing for me. I was a part of the McNair program that's also helped me get to the PhD stage. So I would say that's my reflection of just being happy to now give back in terms of in the classroom, and being able to teach and pay that part forward is great for me.
Because it's like, what do I want to understand? I'm kind of.
Ask the question again, please.
What do you want to understand about your own place at CUNY? Something like place experience.
I am committed to trying to be the best educator that I can be. And I think that CUNY provides that environment to do that. And I think that my students also provide the pushback and the forced reflection at times. So I think that's what I'm pulling from the experience, and that's what like has me committed to doing this work at CUNY as an educator. Every semester, I learn lessons from my students that make me rethink something that I did right or potentially did wrong, or I'm gonna try it again because I didn't trust the assessment of the students from the previous semester. But the idea is that at the end of the day, I'm just trying to be the best person to transfer information to my students, and hopefully that transferring is gonna inspire them to act.
Yeah, I second that. Like, just wanted to make sure that I gave them my best as an educator, and that they walked away remembering my course. The rule of thumb is, if you take a course, you must learn one, take away and remember one thing from that course, no matter, 15, 16 weeks, take away one thing. And I hope that whatever they take away, continues to assist them through all aspects of life.
I have a few more questions here. So let's see. This next question I have is, how do we emphasize or recognize the value today of the scholar activist? And I think this says the lay scholar. How do we emphasize or recognize the value today of the scholar activist and the lay scholar?
I'll do the scholar activist component. The Black intellectual tradition is reflective of not merely armchair intellectuals, but scholars who are also connected to the people and the realities that they're going through. One of the reasons why I'm committed to doing organizational work is because I love scholarship, I love theory, but I want to be able to make the connection to the people. And the scholar activist tradition is, reflective of Ida B. Wells, it's reflective of Du Bois, it's reflective of Anna Julia Good. We can go down the line and find all of these folks who were committed to not merely, intellectual, ideas, but they were connected to connecting to the community. Even go back, to the 1800s. Look at the American Negro Academy. Okay, the American Negro Academy starts, and these folks are like, listen, how do we connect this? Mm-hmm. Even in the midst of Black History Month, mm-hmm. Carter G. Woodson, he was saying, how do we, make this history relevant to all of us? So I think that the scholar activist tradition is the very basis of Black intellectuals, and that scholar activist tradition then informs the work that we try to do in Black and Latino studies. It's not merely just this intellectual pontification. It's like, no, you got ideas, share them with the people so that they can be inspired to act.
For me, it was easy. Once I started to notice a pattern in the work of different scholars, including, and of course, Elijah Anderson, Imani Perry, Sylvia Winter, and I started, the folk ethnography and all these terminologies started to pop up, and I realized, there's something here. And so I did a thing with Meek Mill. Is Meek Mill a critical race theorist? And I remember bringing it, I presented it through Futures Initiative, and then through Haystack Futures Initiative, and then I brought it to my students, and my students looked at me and was like, before I even said anything, why are you choosing Meek Mill? Why didn't you choose J. Cole or something, right? They wanted to connect it, and I said, let me finish my presentation, and then we'll talk. At the end of the presentation, the students were like, Miss, did you write this up? I don't mind reading this in depth. And so what happens is they realized he was a lay scholar because they didn't take his work as theory. They didn't take his work as critical, anything like critical. And I said, but when I rearranged the lyrics and I gave them references and social, political, cultural, historical references, they understood that this is scholarship. It doesn't, because there's profanity, because there's all these other elements, you miss it, right? You miss it because he's talking about diamonds and jewelry, but he's also talking about incarceration. Mm-hmm. And of course, in a macrocosm, that's capitalism, all of that. And so when we're looking at and we're having this conversation, and you're like, oh, I didn't, and I was like, yeah. And so I would be the former scholar, Meek would be the latter scholar, but collectively, we're like both doing the scholarship.
I will say that for me, when I think about activism and scholarship and like the connection or relationship between them both, it's again thinking about taking theory and putting it into practice, and not just in the classroom but outside of the classroom. So whether that's helping students to understand how they navigate social media or music or everything else in their everyday life, and thinking how the classroom can kind of work in conversation with that, and also thinking about how this theory into practice is also built on the intent of informing or upholding radical revisions of change in every sector, wherever it is that they're interested in. That's also part of activism. It's not about how many people are in the audience or how many people are listening to you or that you can connect with, but also the intent of your work and the framework and the way that you're kind of going through it.
So this next question, and I think this might have come from the audience, so there are a couple of names here that I'm not sure that I can read what the names say. How do the Lost and Found books by Audre Lorde, June Jordan, and is that Tony Cade, shape your understanding of CUNY 1969, and how do we take this as this understanding to our future work?
Tony Cade was no joke. And the piece that I was reading from her, from the Lost and Found, kind of inspired me and my work that I do in the classroom, and also my relationship to the SEEK program, because of how she valued and saw the importance of those students and the work that she was doing with them. So that's all I can say. And I'm thankful that we had Audre Lorde through CUNY, June Jordan, Tony Capenbar. Like, that's a Black feminist foundation that we all need to be, utilizing in order to think about the work that we're doing inside CUNY. And to go back to think about, like, the importance of the CUNY experience. The students need to know that. They need to know that these people who are amazing taught within the system, and we're trying to inspire their students to act and resist and push back.
Agreed. I think those texts are also, if not also important, in understanding and everything that Karanja said, and the passion and love that these educators had for their students. And CUNY was knocking them down, SUNY was knocking them down. They had health issues, and he said, can we get sabbatical? And CUNY said, no, you can't. And they were still fighting for their students. They're fighting with their students, giving them blankets, having them hold space for their resistance, to speak, to make sure that the men and the women had equal voices, right? Because, of course, patriarchy, it'll slip into any revolutionary movement. And her acknowledging, and I'm thinking of Audre Lorde as I speak this, her acknowledging that they, the patriarchy and the male chauvinism, it seeps through. And then I'm thinking about June Jordan's work and her, Audre Lorde at John Jay, when when she's like, she's composing the composition, the idea of composition, right? She's composing these students to be, law-abiding citizens, but she's also composing these officers to officers who are going outside and killing these young Black and brown people, right? And the conflict between it, and teaching and what that looks like and what that feels like. So, yeah.
So one of the many things that I'm nerding out about right now is I'm doing a reading list on the genealogy of Black women storytelling. So I'm starting from Harriet Jacobs to more contemporary work. So when I'm thinking about Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison and June Jordan and Tony Cade, I'm also really fascinated by how they connect and how they were contemporaries, and how they were navigating similar and not so similar spaces, doing similar but not so similar writing around the same time and getting published around the same time. So when I'm teaching it in class, I also try to give a brief biography of the writers. So I'm telling them June Jordan is from Brooklyn and she taught at City College, just to also get in their minds that like we said, CUNY is a historical place and a historical system, and all these names that might sound mythical and far from you is actually not as far as you think. It's all really tangible in here. So I think projects like the Lost and Found really do that type of work and tracing genealogies across CUNY, and also just putting these different women writers in conversation with one another too.
So I think we have 2 minutes left for the Q&A, and I have a question here about how do we do this kind of transformative education online? And can we continue this work as CUNY moves online more? Or even as CUNY transforms, across time?
What's the second part?
Can we continue this work as CUNY moves online more?
Definitely. I mean, the pandemic showed us we were online when we were doing this work. I couldn't do it any other way. And so for me, it was drawing them in, and that's why CUNY 1969 project being digital and still having multimedia, so for the different learners, it allows them to interact differently, right? Give them the freedom of choice of different items. I don't know how you two are doing it in your classroom, but
I think that to me it's the visual component. If we're gonna have them there online, it's all right, well, what did this look like? What are the news articles from this time period look like? What do those images bring up for you? You know, and how do you respond to them? And I think that we get that through the CUNY 1969 project, because they're able to go through those different experiences, able to read the voices of those students, able to read the voices of others in order to make the connection. So I think that it's helpful, and I think that it's doable, and it's a necessary work if we're moving more and more online.
From a pedagogical standpoint, I think like as like instructors, it kind of forces us or maybe helps us to be a little bit more creative and imaginative when we're thinking about teaching. I have a very short history of teaching, but my first teaching experience was online during the pandemic, so I really didn't have a choice. And then when I came in person, I was like, oh, this is crazy. But I think it forces us to kind of rethink different things. So like Kashema talking about like hip hop, I mean, how can you then kind of do that in an online setting? Like what type of videos can you kind of then show, or however way. Then also in terms of just being accessible, like we said, how CUNY is like a commuter school. So I think it allows students to attend more classes or be present in different spaces. I think there's pros and cons, but I think in terms of the pros, I think that's probably the main ones for me.
Yeah, I know that the CUNY Digital History Archive has also been very influential to the CUNY 1969 project as well. So I think we'll be passing things over to Pamela, but I wanted to thank you again for coming here today, and I appreciate the conversation. So thank you all for that.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So we do want to thank our panelists and Christopher and some other folks that have been just absolutely instrumental in making both this panel and this project happen. So just quickly, our grateful thanks to the CUNY OER Grant Initiative and the Transformative Learning in the Humanities Initiatives for their financial support and also just their generous appreciation of this work. The CUNY Digital History Archive and especially Roxanne Shirazi has been a great resource and a good supporter of this project. Some individual folks that you will see here have been collaborators, contributors, cheerleaders. So we thank them, and especially the folks who participated in what we call our Summer 2022 Teach-In, some of whom are here on the panel today, but there are many others who are part of our CUNY 1969 and our CUNY community. So that Teach-In, that event, is happening again. So I am going to reach over if I can. So we wanted to close out by saying that we want to extend our CUNY 1969 project community. And in support of that, we're holding another Teach-In event this June. So what that event looks like is over the course of about 4 weeks, we have some synchronous time together. We have some asynchronous time together. This year, we might even have the possibility of some in-person time together, where we learn and share and talk about both the project and some of the issues around archives, around digital work, around pedagogy, but we also really draw on the expertise of the people in the room. And so that was really great for us, and I hope it was great for you guys. And so we want to extend this to more folks across CUNY, faculty and staff. So you will see, if you are part of the CUNY community, you'll see that there will be a call for applications coming soon to your emails off various listservs. So keep an eye on your emails for that. But I'm going to change the slide one more time. For those who are in the room, you can come up at the end. That QR code will take you to a Google form that will sign you up for just notifications about events happening around this project. So the call for applications will go out through there. Any other programming we have related to that will all be there. Information about pedagogy resources that are going to become available soon. all will be there. And we encourage you also just to check out the project. Also, you can get in contact with us if you're not able to get the QR code. You can find us, Google Baruch CTL. That's how everybody finds us. We have connections to all of the CTL contributors, the Center for Teaching and Learning contributors on that site, as well as a main email inbox. You'll be able to reach us that way. So thank you again to everyone who has been a part of this event, everyone who came, and everyone who is joining us online. And Hamad?
Very, very special thank you to Stella, to Jillian, for doing all the media stuff today. Tamara helping out on the sound, and Alfred, thank you so much for doing things before we even asked you to. So, and thank you everyone for coming off, of course.
Thank you.